When my greedy daughter-in-law said I wasn't welcome at the Mother's Day celebration, their mortgage check was canceled. By me. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The message from Fiona arrived on Wednesday afternoon, 3 days before Mother's Day. I was in my kitchen, arranging flowers I'd picked from my garden. My phone chimed with her name, and I felt that familiar knot in my stomach tighten, the one that always appeared when my daughter-in-law contacted me. Barbara, Thomas, and I have decided to keep Mother's Day intimate this year, just immediate family. Hope you understand. I read the text 3 times, my fingers trembling. Immediate family. The words cut through me like shards of glass. After 5 years of marriage to my son, Fiona still didn't consider me immediate family. I set my phone down and gripped the edge of the counter, trying to steady my breathing. For 3 years, I'd been helping them with their mortgage payments, $1,600 a month that stretched my retirement savings thin. Money I'd gladly given to help them establish themselves, to give Thomas the foundation I'd always wanted for him. My phone rang. Thomas. Mom, he started, his voice strained in that way it always was when Fiona was nearby. Did you get Fiona's message? Yes. I managed to keep my voice even. I was just wondering what immediate family means if not your mother. A pause. I could hear him cover the phone, murmuring to someone. Fiona, no doubt. When he returned, his voice was firmer. Fiona's parents are coming over. We thought it would be nice to have just the 4 of us this year. The betrayal stung sharper than I expected. I see. And I'm not considered immediate family, but her parents are? Mom, don't make this difficult. Thomas sighed. Fiona thinks, we think, it would be better this way. You and Fiona have been tense lately. Tense. What a polite way to describe how my daughter-in-law rolled her eyes whenever I spoke. How she'd accidentally left me off family email chains. How she'd made comments about my clothes, my hair, my opinions. Will you still need the mortgage check this month? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Of course, Thomas responded quickly. Why wouldn't we? I closed my eyes, feeling something break inside me. Just checking. I'll mail it tomorrow. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the check I'd already written. 3 years of checks. 3 years of inviting them for Sunday dinners they rarely attended. 3 years of birthday and Christmas gifts that were acknowledged, with obligatory thank you texts. 3 years of watching Fiona slowly erase me from my son's life. That evening, I received another text from Fiona. Just so you know, we're having a proper Mother's Day celebration with my mom. I hope you're not too upset about our decision. It's just that Thomas and I feel more comfortable this way. You can sometimes be a bit overwhelming. Overwhelming. The word echoed in my mind as tears burned my eyes. Was it overwhelming to love your child? To want to be part of their life? I picked up the mortgage check again, running my finger along the edge. Then, with a clarity I hadn't felt in years, I tore it in half. Then quarters. Then eighths. I dropped the pieces into my shredder and watched them disappear. My hands shook, but not from sadness. From resolve. If I wasn't family enough to be included on Mother's Day, then perhaps I wasn't family enough to pay their mortgage. The next morning, I called the bank and canceled the automatic payment I had scheduled. The customer service representative asked if there was a problem. No, I said, my voice steadier than it had been in months. I've just realized it's time for some changes. When I hung up, I felt a strange mixture of guilt and liberation. For the first time in years, I had chosen myself. The weight of constantly trying to earn Fiona's approval, of pretending her subtle cruelties didn't hurt, suddenly lifted from my shoulders. I knew there would be consequences. Thomas would be furious. Fiona would have another reason to paint me as the difficult mother-in-law. But as I looked at the empty space where the check had been, I realized I couldn't continue financing my own exclusion. 3 days later, on Mother's Day, I turned off my phone and spent the day planting new flowers in my garden. With each seed I tucked into the soil, I made a promise to myself. No more shrinking, no more apologizing for existing, no more financing people who didn't value me. Little did I know that by sundown, my peaceful act of self-respect would unleash a storm that would change our family forever. The first call came at 7:42 a.m. on Monday. I was enjoying my morning coffee on the porch when Thomas's name flashed across my screen. I let it ring. 10 minutes later, he called again. By the third call, I knew I couldn't avoid the inevitable confrontation any longer. "Hello, Thomas," I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Mom? What the hell?" His voice was strained, anger barely contained. "The bank called. They said the mortgage payment bounced. Did you cancel your check?" I took a slow sip of my coffee before responding. "Yes, I did." "What? Why would you?" He stopped abruptly, and I heard muffled voices. Fiona in the background, no doubt. When he returned, his tone had hardened. "Is this because of Mother's Day? Are you seriously that petty?" The accusation stung, but I held firm. "This isn't about pettiness, Thomas. This is about respect. For 3 years, I've helped you with your mortgage. I've given you over $50,000 while Fiona has systematically pushed me out of your life. That's not fair," he shot back. "Fiona hasn't—" "Thomas," I interrupted, surprising myself with my firmness. "Your wife told me I wasn't welcome on Mother's Day because I'm overwhelming. She invited her parents instead. If I'm not family enough to celebrate Mother's Day with you, then perhaps I'm not family enough to pay your mortgage." Silence hung between us for a moment before he spoke again, his voice lower. "This is really disappointing, Mom. I never thought you'd use money to manipulate us." His words hit like a physical blow. "Manipulate? Is that what you think I've been doing all these years? Supporting you?" "Fiona thinks—" "I don't care what Fiona thinks anymore," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "I care. What you think, Thomas? What do you think about excluding your mother from Mother's Day?" Another pause. "I think you're overreacting. It was just one day." "It's not just one day," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "It's a pattern, and I'm done financing my own exclusion." I ended the call before he could respond, my hands trembling as I set down the phone. The peaceful morning I'd planned was shattered, but I didn't regret my decision. By noon, the text messages started. "Fiona, real mature, Barbara. Using money as a weapon just proves why we wanted space from you." "Fiona, Thomas is devastated by your behavior. Is this really the kind of mother you want to be?" "Thomas, Mom, please call me back. We need to fix this." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I busied myself with gardening, trying to lose myself in the rhythm of digging and planting, but the peace I sought eluded me. Around 3 p.m., my doorbell rang. I peered through the peephole to see Thomas and Fiona standing on my porch, both looking thunderous. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. "We need to talk," Thomas said, brushing past me without waiting for an invitation. Fiona followed, her eyes scanning my living room with thinly veiled disdain. "Yes, we do," I agreed, closing the door and turning to face them. "Would you like some tea?" "We don't want tea," Fiona snapped. "We want an explanation, and for you to fix this mess you've created." I looked at my son, searching his face for any sign of the boy I'd raised, the one who once brought me dandelions and called them flowers, who held my hand at his father's funeral and promised we'd always take care of each other. All I saw was a man who couldn't meet my eyes. "I've already explained," I said calmly. "I won't continue to financially support people who don't respect me." "This isn't about respect," Fiona's voice rose. "This is about you trying to control us. You've always wanted to control Thomas, and you can't stand that he has me now." "That's not true," I said, keeping my voice level despite the anger bubbling inside me. I've never tried to control either of you. I've only wanted to be treated with basic courtesy and inclusion. You call barging into our lives and criticizing everything I do basic courtesy? Fiona shot back. I blinked, genuinely confused. When have I ever criticized you, Fiona? You do it all the time. The way you look at our house, how you ask about our finances, your comments about my cooking. I've never said a negative word about your cooking, I protested. You don't have to say it. It's your expression, the way you pick at your food. I turned to Thomas, desperate for him to see reason. Thomas, you know that's not true. He shifted uncomfortably. Mom, you can be critical sometimes. Maybe not directly, but his words trailed off, and I felt a chill settle over me. This was what Fiona had done, twisted my actions, reframed my words, until even my own son saw me as the villain in their story. I think you should both leave, I said quietly. Not until you agree to reinstate the mortgage payment, Fiona demanded. Looked at her, really looked at her, and suddenly saw everything clearly. The subtle manipulation, the way she'd positioned herself between Thomas and me, the calculated effort to isolate him from his family. No, I said, the word carrying the weight of years of silent acquiescence. The answer is no. You'll regret this, Fiona hissed, grabbing her purse. Come on, Thomas. She's made her choice. Thomas hesitated, looking torn. Mom, please, we can work this out. Yes, we can, I agreed. But not like this, not with threats and accusations. Fine, he said finally, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Have it your way. As they left, slamming the door behind them, I didn't cry. Instead, I felt a strange, calm certainty settling over me. The worst had happened. My son had chosen his wife over me, and I had survived. What I didn't know then was that the real battle was just beginning. That evening, my phone buzzed with a notification. My sister had tagged me in a Facebook post. With trembling fingers, I opened it to find a lengthy message from Fiona, detailing how I had abandoned my son in his time of need, how I was using money to control him, how I had always been jealous of their relationship. The family war had gone public. By the end of the week, I had 37 missed calls, 62 text messages, and countless social media notifications. Fiona's post had spread through our extended family like wildfire, with people taking sides without even hearing my version of events. I'd turned off my notifications, unable to bear the constant judgment. My sister Janet was the only one who called to hear my side. This doesn't sound like you, Barb, she'd said. What really happened? After I explained, she sighed deeply. I always thought there was something off about Fiona. Too perfect, too polished. I just don't understand how Thomas can't see it, I said, my voice breaking. He's always been such a good judge of character. Love blinds people, Janet replied. And manipulators like Fiona are experts at isolation. It's textbook. Her words stayed with me as I tried to go about my days. Textbook manipulation. Was that what I'd been experiencing all these years? On Saturday morning, I found myself pulling boxes from the attic, photo albums, holiday cards, old emails I'd printed. I spread them across the living room floor, creating a timeline of my relationship with Thomas and Fiona. The change was subtle but unmistakable. In the first year after they started dating, Thomas called me several times a week. We had Sunday dinners regularly. He brought Fiona to family gatherings, and though she was never warm with me, she was polite. Then came their engagement. The calls became less frequent. Sunday dinners dwindled to once a month, then special occasions only. Thomas began to cancel. Plans last minute. I found a Christmas card from 3 years ago, the first Christmas after they were married. Mom, we're so blessed to have your support. Love you always, Thomas and Fiona. The same year they asked for help with the mortgage, claiming they were struggling to make ends meet. I pulled out my financial records next. The mortgage payments, $600 each month. But there were other expenses too, helping with their car, insurance, paying for home repairs, covering the property taxes last year when they claimed they were short. All while Fiona posted pictures of their new furniture, their weekend trips, the designer clothes she just couldn't resist. I'd seen the posts and felt uneasy, but I'd dismissed my concerns. They were young, enjoying life. I wanted Thomas to have the things I couldn't give him growing up as a single mother. But now, looking at it all laid out chronologically, a pattern emerged that I couldn't ignore. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. An unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Barbara? It's Claire, Fiona's sister. I stiffened. Claire and I had met only a handful of times at family gatherings. She'd always seemed uncomfortable around Fiona, staying on the periphery of conversations. Claire, I said cautiously, how did you get my number? From Thomas's old contact list. Look, I don't have much time, but I saw Fiona's Facebook post and I couldn't stay silent. Something in her voice, a tremor of fear perhaps, made me pay attention. What do you mean? Fiona's done this before, Claire said, her words coming, in a rush. With our stepfather. She manipulated our mother into thinking he was controlling and negative, always criticizing. Mom eventually asked him to move out. It tore our family apart. I sank onto the couch, my heart pounding. Why are you telling me this? Because I've seen how she isolates people, twists their words, creates false narratives. And then she uses them. Financially, emotionally, however she can, until they're not useful anymore. My mind raced back to all the subtle comments, the way Fiona would rephrase my words when telling Thomas, making innocent questions sound like criticism. There's more, Claire continued, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. Check Thomas's email if you can. 3 months ago, Fiona was planning a surprise anniversary party for you both. Thomas asked me to help. But then suddenly it was canceled, and Fiona told everyone you had declined the invitation, saying you were too busy. My throat tightened. I never received an invitation. I know. Because there never was one. Fiona made it up, told Thomas she'd called you that you weren't interested in celebrating with them. Tears burned my eyes as pieces started falling into place. Forgotten invitations, misunderstood conversations, times when Thomas seemed hurt by something I supposedly said or did. Why would she do this? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Control, Claire said simply. And your money. Thomas mentioned once that you helped them with the mortgage. Is that true? Yes, I admitted. For 3 years now. That explains a lot. Fiona's always looking for financial support. She did the same with our stepfather, asked for money constantly, then turned around and told our mother he was trying to control her through his handouts. We talked for another 20 minutes, Claire filling in gaps in the narrative I'd been trying to piece together. When we finally hung up, I sat among the scattered evidence of years of manipulation, my mind reeling. I hadn't canceled that check out of pettiness or revenge. Some part of me had sensed what was happening all along, had finally reached its breaking point. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. Mom, we need to talk. Just you and me. Please. I stared at the message, feeling both hope and dread. Was he finally seeing the truth? Or was this another trap, orchestrated by Fiona? Either way, I knew I couldn't ignore it. This was my son, the little boy I'd raised. Alone, the young man who'd once looked at me with nothing but love and respect in his eyes. Tomorrow, I typed back. My house, 2 p.m. As I sent the message, I began gathering the evidence spread across my floor. Tomorrow, Thomas would hear the truth, whether he was ready for it or not. At exactly 2:03 p.m., Thomas's car pulled into my driveway. I watched from the window as he sat there for a moment, his forehead resting against the steering wheel. When he finally emerged, his shoulders were hunched, his movements hesitant, so unlike the confident young man I'd raised. I opened the door before he could knock. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. Thomas paused at the threshold, eyes scanning. The living room where I'd arranged the evidence of Fiona's manipulation, photos, financial records, text messages printed out and organized chronologically. "What is all this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "The truth," I replied. "Please, sit down." He lowered himself onto the couch, looking lost in the home where he'd grown up. I noticed the dark circles under his eyes, the rumpled shirt, signs that he wasn't sleeping well. "Would you like some coffee?" I offered, falling back on hospitality to ease the tension. He shook his head. "Mom, I need to understand why you canceled the mortgage payment. We're struggling." "The bank is threatening." "Are you really struggling, Thomas?" I interrupted, my voice gentle but firm. I handed him a folder containing their social media posts from the last 3 months. "Because according to Fiona's Instagram, you just took a weekend trip to Napa. You bought new living room furniture. Fiona has 3 new designer handbags." He flipped through the printouts, his brow furrowing. "Those were special occasions. The trip was a work thing. The furniture was on sale. And these?" I handed him my financial records. 3 years of mortgage payments, home repairs, property taxes, car insurance, all while you two were supposedly struggling. Thomas set the papers down, running a hand through his hair. "It's not what you think. We had a plan to pay you back eventually." "This isn't about paying me back," I said, feeling a lump form in my throat. "It's about respect, Thomas. It's about being treated like family, not an ATM machine." His eyes flashed with anger. "That's not fair. We've always appreciated—" "Have you?" I asked quietly. "Because from where I'm sitting, appreciation looks a lot different than being excluded from Mother's Day while my money is still welcome." He fell silent, unable to meet my eyes. "Thomas," I continued, my voice softening. "I received a call from Claire yesterday." His head snapped up, surprise evident on his face. "Fiona's sister? Why would she call you?" "Because she's seen this pattern. Before. With their stepfather." I recounted my conversation with Claire, watching as Thomas's expression shifted from disbelief to confusion to dawning realization. When I told him about the anniversary party that never existed, he paled visibly. "That can't be right," he muttered. "Fiona told me she called you. She said you were too busy, that you had a spa day planned with Janet." "I never received that call, Thomas, and I haven't been to a spa in years." He stood abruptly, pacing the living room, stopping occasionally to examine a piece of evidence, the timeline of canceled plans, the record of financial support, the text messages between Fiona and her friends where she referred to me as the cash cow. "I don't understand," he said finally, his voice breaking. "Why would she do this? People who manipulate others do it, for control." I explained gently. "And sometimes for financial gain." Thomas sank back onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. I've been such a fool. My heart ached for him. Despite everything, he was still my son, and seeing him in pain was almost unbearable. I sat beside him, placing a tentative hand on his shoulder. "You're not a fool, Thomas. Manipulative people are incredibly skilled at what they do. They isolate their targets, rewrite narratives, create division. It's not your fault." He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "But I believed her. Over my own mother. How can you ever forgive me for that?" I squeezed his shoulder. "There's nothing to forgive. You loved her. You trusted her. That's what good people do." We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of revelation hanging heavy between us. Finally, Thomas spoke again, his voice steadier. "What happens now?" It was the question I'd been asking myself all night. What did happen now? Could our relationship be repaired? Could Thomas see his way out of Fiona's manipulation? That depends on you, I said carefully. I can't tell you what to do about your marriage. That's your decision. But I can tell you that I'm setting boundaries from now on. I won't be financing your lifestyle anymore. Not because I don't love you, but because it's not healthy for either of us. He nodded slowly. I understand. And I wouldn't ask that of you again. He paused, swallowing hard. I need to talk to Fiona. Confront her with what I know. A flash of fear went through me. Be careful, Thomas. When manipulators are exposed, they often become volatile. What choice do I have? He asked, his eyes meeting mine. I can't continue living a lie. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it, his expression hardening. It's Fiona. She's been tracking my location through my phone. She wants to know why I'm here. What will you tell? Her? Thomas stood, a new resolve in his posture. The truth, that I'm talking to my mother, that I've seen the evidence of her manipulation, that things are going to change. His phone buzzed again, more insistently this time. Then again. And again. She's calling now, he said, showing me the screen. I should take this outside. I nodded, watching as he stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind him. Through the window, I could see his back straighten as he answered, could see his free hand gesturing emphatically as he spoke. After a few minutes, he ended the call and stood motionless, staring out at the street. When he came back inside, his face was pale but determined. She's coming over, he said. She says there's been a misunderstanding, that she can explain everything. My stomach twisted with anxiety. Do you want me to be here for that conversation? Thomas took a deep breath, then nodded. Yes. It's time we all faced the truth together. As we waited for Fiona to arrive, I prepared myself for the confrontation ahead. I wasn't naive enough to think this would end neatly or painlessly, but for the first time in years, I felt like my son and I were standing on the same side. The sound of squealing tires announced Fiona's arrival before we saw her car. Fiona burst through my front door without knocking, her perfectly styled hair, slightly disheveled, her eyes wild with anger. She froze when she saw the evidence spread across my living room, the financial records, the timeline of her manipulations, the screenshots of her social media posts. What is this? She demanded, her voice shrill. Her gaze darted between Thomas and me. What have you been telling him? Thomas stood, his posture rigid. The truth, Fiona, or at least what I've been able to piece together. The truth? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean her warped version of events? Thomas, you know how your mother twists things. I remained seated, watching as she employed the tactics Claire had described: deflection, projection, gaslighting. I talked to your sister, Thomas said quietly. Fiona's expression flickered, surprise, then fury. Claire? That backstabbing little... She stopped herself, composing her features into a mask of hurt. Claire has always been jealous of me. Whatever, she said, is a lie. Is this a lie? Thomas asked, holding up a printout of text messages between Fiona and her friend. Messages where she referred to me as the cash cow and boasted about how she'd trained Thomas to choose her over his mother. Fiona's face paled. Where did you get those? Claire sent them to your mother. Apparently you two share an iCloud account. She's seen everything, Fiona. For a moment, Fiona seemed at a loss for words. Then her expression hardened. So what? So I vented to my friends. Everyone does that. Vented? Thomas repeated incredulously. You literally wrote, and I quote, Barbara, we'll keep paying the mortgage as long as we pretend to care about her. Once the house is paid off, we can cut her off completely. Fiona's eyes narrowed dangerously. You had no right to go through my private messages. And you had no right to manipulate my relationship with my mother, Thomas shot back, his voice rising. You had no right to lie about calls and invitations, to twist her words, to use her financially while systematically pushing her out of our lives. Fiona's demeanor suddenly shifted. Tears welled in her eyes, and her shoulders slumped. I was just trying to protect our marriage, she whispered. Your mother has always hated me, always tried to come between us. I finally spoke up, my voice calm. That's not true, Fiona. I welcomed you into our family. I supported you both financially and emotionally. All I ever wanted was to be included in your lives. She rounded on me, the vulnerable act vanishing, as quickly as it had appeared. You think your money gives you the right to control us? To dictate how we live? My mother never tried to control us, Thomas interjected. She was helping us, at our request. She canceled the mortgage payment. Fiona snapped. If that's not control, what is? It's a boundary, I said simply. One I should have set a long time ago. Fiona's face contorted with rage. You've turned him against me, she hissed. You and Claire and your lies. No one needed to turn me against you, Thomas said wearily. You did that yourself, with every manipulation, every lie. Every time you tried to erase my mother from our lives while still taking her money. Fiona's gaze darted around the room like a cornered animal looking for escape. This is ridiculous. I'm leaving. She turned to Thomas. Are you coming? The question hung in the air between them. A simple query that carried the weight of their entire marriage. Thomas took a deep breath. No, Fiona, I'm not. The 3 words seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Fiona's eyes widened in disbelief. You're choosing her over me, after everything we've built together? I'm choosing the truth, Thomas replied, his voice steady for the first time since arriving. And the truth is, our marriage was built on lies. Your lies. Fiona took a step back, as if physically struck by his words. Then her expression hardened into something cold and calculating. Fine, she spat. Stay with Mommy, but don't think this is over. She pointed a manicured finger at me. And you. You'll regret this. With that, she stormed out, slamming the door so hard that the windows rattled. The sound of her car starting and speeding away broke the heavy silence she left behind. Thomas collapsed onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. I can't believe I didn't see it, he murmured. All this time, right in front of me. I sat beside him, placing a gentle hand on his back. Don't blame yourself. She's very good at what she does. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. What happens now? It was a complicated question with no easy answer. That's up to you, I said carefully. But whatever you decide, I want you to know that I'm here for you. Even after everything? After I believed her over you? After I let her push you away? You're my son, I said simply. That hasn't changed. The next few weeks were a blur of legal consultations, painful conversations, and difficult decisions. Thomas moved into my spare bedroom temporarily while he figured out his next steps. Fiona refused to leave their house, claiming he had abandoned her. She alternated between tearful pleas for reconciliation and vicious attacks on his character. 2 days after the confrontation, I received a certified letter from an attorney threatening to sue me for intentional infliction of emotional distress and interference with contractual relations. I forwarded it to my own lawyer without comment. A week later, Thomas filed for separation. The day after that, Fiona emptied their joint bank account. Through it all, I watched my son struggle to come to terms with the deception that had defined his marriage. Some days he was angry, at Fiona, at himself, occasionally even at me for not being more forceful in my concerns about her. Other days he was consumed by doubt, questioning whether he was making the right decision. Maybe I should try to work it out, he said one evening as we sat on the porch. Marriage is supposed to be forever, right? Marriage should be based on Trust and mutual respect, I replied. Only you can decide if those things can be rebuilt. He was quiet for a long time after that. The next morning, he called a divorce attorney. The most painful moment came when Fiona began spreading rumors among their mutual friends. According to her, Thomas had cheated on her. I had orchestrated their breakup out of jealousy. We had conspired to leave her destitute. Some believed her. Thomas lost friends he'd had since college. People crossed the street to avoid him in the grocery store. The church they'd attended together asked him to find another congregation until the situation was resolved. I never knew she could be so vindictive, Thomas said, stunned by the backlash. When manipulative people lose control, they often lash out, I explained. They need to rewrite the narrative, to make themselves the victim. As painful as it was to watch my son weather these storms, I saw him growing stronger each day, more certain of his decision, more aware of the manipulation tactics that had once blinded him. 1 month after filing for separation, Thomas received a text from Claire. Stay strong. The truth always comes out eventually. 2 days later, we discovered what she meant. 1 year later, I stood in my garden, pruning roses as the morning sun warmed my shoulders. The past 12 months had been a journey, painful at times, liberating at others, but ultimately healing. The sound of a car pulling into my driveway made me look up. Thomas emerged, carrying a small gift bag and wearing a smile that reached his eyes, something I hadn't seen in years. Happy Mother's Day, he said, embracing me tightly. You remembered, I replied, feeling a lump form in my throat. How could I forget? I made reservations at Giovanni's for noon. I hope that works for you. I nodded, unable to speak past the emotion welling inside me. After everything we'd been through, these simple gestures, a hug, a dinner reservation, his presence, meant more than he could possibly know. We sat on the porch swing, a tradition from his childhood when we'd share popsicles and stories on warm days. I have news, Thomas said, a hint of nervous excitement in his voice. The divorce is final. I squeezed his hand. How do you feel? He considered the question carefully. Relieved, sad that it came to this, but mostly free. The divorce had been messy, as they often are. Fiona had fought every step of the way, demanding the house, alimony, even my continued financial support as part of the settlement. Her claims had been so outrageous that eventually her own attorney had advised her to be more reasonable. The turning point had come 3 months after Thomas filed for separation. Fiona's friend Melissa, troubled by the vicious lies being spread about Thomas and me, had come forward with screenshots of conversations revealing Fiona's calculated plan to use us financially, while systematically isolating Thomas from his family. She said she targeted you specifically, Melissa had explained, because she knew you'd help them financially, and she thought you'd be easy to manipulate because you'd do anything for Thomas. With that evidence, the divorce proceedings had shifted dramatically in Thomas's favor. The house was sold, the proceeds split equitably, and Fiona's demands for ongoing support were dismissed. I have another piece of news, Thomas continued, pulling me from my memories. I've put an offer on a house. It's small, just a 2-bedroom, but it's mine. Well, mine and the bank's, he added with a self-deprecating laugh. That's wonderful, I said, genuinely happy for him. Where is it? About 15 minutes from here. Close enough for regular visits, but far enough for us both to have our independence. I nodded, appreciating the thoughtfulness behind his decision. Over the past year, we'd both worked hard to rebuild our relationship on healthier foundations. I'd set clear boundaries about financial support, and he'd respected them, working extra hours to save for his down payment instead of asking for my help. There's something I want you to know, Thomas said, his expression growing serious. I'm seeing a therapist, have been for a few months now. That's good, I replied softly. I'm proud of you for taking that step. He nodded. It's helping me understand how I got caught in Fiona's manipulation, why I was vulnerable to it. And he hesitated. How my relationship with you played into it. I tensed slightly, unsure where this was heading. Not in the way you might think, he clarified quickly. It's just, I always felt like I needed to be perfect for you, to make up for Dad leaving, to justify all your sacrifices. Fiona sensed that insecurity and exploited it. I took a deep breath, feeling my own guilt surface. I never wanted you to feel that pressure. I know, he said gently, but I did. And when Fiona came along and told me I was perfect just as I was, that I deserved everything without having to earn it, it was intoxicating. His honesty both hurt and healed. I'm sorry if I ever made you feel like you weren't enough, I whispered. You didn't, he assured me. But I'm learning that sometimes our perceptions are shaped by things beyond our control, like a child of divorce assuming they need to be perfect to keep their remaining parent from leaving too. We sat in contemplative silence for a moment, the swing creaking softly beneath us. Anyway, Thomas continued, his tone lightening, the therapist thinks we're both making good progress, especially since we're talking more openly now. We are, I agreed. The past year had taught us both to communicate more honestly, to express needs and concerns directly instead of assuming or suppressing them. Thomas reached into the gift bag he'd brought and pulled out a small, flat package wrapped in silver paper. For you, he said. Open it now. I carefully unwrapped it to find a framed photograph. Thomas and me at his college graduation, both beaming with pride and joy. It was the last photo taken of us before he met Fiona, the last uncomplicated moment of our relationship. I found it when I was packing, he explained. Thought you might like to have it. Tears welled in my eyes as I traced the frame with my fingertips. It's perfect, I managed. Later, as we drove to the restaurant, I reflected on how far we'd come. The painful exclusion from last year's Mother's Day had set in motion a chain of events that, while devastating at the time, had ultimately led to healing and truth. I'd heard through mutual friends that Fiona had moved to another state and was already engaged to a wealthy businessman twice her age. I felt no satisfaction in this news, only a quiet hope that her new fiancé might see through her manipulations before suffering the same fate as Thomas. At the restaurant, Thomas raised his glass in a toast. To new beginnings, he said. And to the strongest woman I know. I smiled, clinking my glass against his. To truth? I added. And to learning our own worth. As we enjoyed our meal, sharing stories and plans for the future, I realized that what I'd initially seen as an ending, that moment when I tore up the mortgage check and set a boundary, had actually been a beginning. The beginning of reclaiming my voice, my financial independence, and most importantly, my relationship with my son. We'd both learned valuable lessons. Thomas about recognizing manipulation and valuing genuine relationships. Me about setting healthy boundaries and understanding that true love doesn't require financial sacrifice or silent suffering. The check that I'd canceled a year ago had seemed, at the time, like a small act of rebellion. In retrospect, it was an act of self-respect that had rippled outward, eventually touching and transforming both our lives. On the drive home, Thomas asked, "Do you ever regret it? Canceling that check?" I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. No. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but also one of the most necessary. He nodded thoughtfully. I think it saved us both. As the sun set behind us, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. We were no longer just mother and son bound by obligation and history, but two adults choosing to be in each other's lives, respecting each other's boundaries, and valuing each other's worth. I had been silenced, but never defeated. And in finding my voice again, I had helped my son find his as well.